I think there's a discomfort with technology issues among senior leaders generally, and particularly among this group of candidates that we see in each party. Often since we're early in the race, the candidates don't really have the infrastructure in place behind the scenes to help them with policy analysis and recommendations. They don't have advisors on full time. But as we move into the 2016 calendar year, you'll start to see the front runners put in place those the policy apparatus behind the scenes so that they can have a little bit more depth. And my sense is that a few of the key candidates are starting to do that right now. So I think that will get them a little bit more comfortable to talk about cybersecurity. We have seen it mentioned in a few of the debates, but you're right, we haven't seen like an in-depth discussion. And the second part of your question was, what would it take? I think, and I mentioned this to the audience, I think it's really worth all of us, as citizens, but also as security practitioners, taking responsibility to ask better questions of our government. That starts at the local level, local politicians here in the state or at the federal level, go and interact with them, go to a town hall meeting, ask better questions, write them a letter, say, hey, what's your view of, emerging cybersecurity trends? What do you want me to come in and talk to you about what I think, or your staff? There's more of that we can do as a community that really will affect senior leaders, because if we start asking them better questions, they'll start doing more research and studying and giving us better answers. And ultimately, in the long term, that's what we need to do. So first, in my experience working for President Obama on his National Security Council staff, I was always really pleasantly surprised at how much interest the president took personally in cybersecurity. It was always in the top 10 to 20 issues that he really cared about, and he has a ton of issues. And I started working for him back in 2009 when the economy was in a shambles. But I think it was because his campaign email got hacked in 2008. And so he started paying attention to hacking threats and cybersecurity really early on, and just always took it seriously. So when it came to getting him to push hard for something, it was actually always pretty easy to do. I can't speak to any of the other candidates this year, but I think the good news is it's an issue now that most people, whereas the last election cycle, most candidates probably didn't consider this a top tier issue. It is now, so I think you'll find them appointing quality people to really focus on it. And we're actually seeing now, dedicated positions in the White House that exist, in the State Department, in the Department of Defense that exist, that didn't exist, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Since there are more senior positions, I think you'll find more, experienced people being appointed at senior levels to advise senior policymakers. And that's a great thing. But it's because, unfortunately, this is such, a dire national security and national economic security issue that we're seeing. It's a good question. And hiring is hard for everybody. As a founder of a tech company, it's my number one priority always, finding great talent. My philosophy is I don't necessarily want people who are motivated only by pay. And I think the same is true of the government. Pay matters. You got to take care of people. They have to be compensated at a market rate. If they're going into the government for a period to serve, maybe they're willing to take below market rate. But the key is you got to give them interesting problems to work on. I don't want people who are motivated by money, because I want the passionate people who love working on tough technology problems. And likewise, those are the people the government wants to attract. The good news is the government has really interesting problems and really big problems that they can offer people. The problem is, though, there's a lot of layers to government, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and what I find most of the time, people leave the government not because they just want better pay, it's because they're frustrated, because they're dealing with middle management who doesn't really get it. who doesn't really give them a chance to run and work on really interesting technologies and innovate. And so, in my opinion, what the government needs to do a better job of doing is freeing up people from a lot of the administrative overhead and bureaucracy that prevents them from working on interesting problems and innovating and creating real solutions. I think there are pockets of the government where you find this. Some organizations within the Department of Defense, actually one or two within like DHS and DOE, within those organizations you find really happy, really innovative people. And the government needs to look at, senior government leaders need to look at those organizations and replicate that model. But it's often not pay that motivates people. It's like getting to work on really interesting problems, and they're empowered to do so, to be creative. It's really about creativity. Well, unfortunately, information sharing won't address the most dire risks, which are the risks that a critical infrastructure system that people rely on to live could be disrupted by a hacker and could be brought down. And in my personal opinion, it will happen. It's a matter of time. I don't like to hype the threat. I think there's a very realistic set of threat scenarios where that make that risk very real. And unfortunately, the executive branch has done everything it can, which really has been via executive order and encouraging people to adopt voluntary frameworks such as the NIST framework. But Congress needs to act on it, and I don't think they take it seriously enough. My personal view is, and I'm maybe a little hawkish on this, but information sharing is too little, too late, that we actually need to do more as a country to protect critical infrastructure systems. And I think it's going to take something, unfortunately, very bad happening, because special interests really have just prevented meaningful reform from happening on the Hill. It's a little bit of a pessimistic view, but it's something that I really believe in, unfortunately, that is a government role, and that government's not doing enough to address it. Well, so that's an interesting question. You want to mandate like smart results and smart reactions to risks, and not prescribe the solution. And that's a very difficult thing for government to get right. There is a way. I think we've seen proposals on the Hill. The Cybersecurity Act of 2012, I think, would have taken us in the right direction to do that. It was a risk-based framework that really focused on incentivizing smart risk mitigation and risk reduction when it comes to cybersecurity, and a focus on the most dire risks, most consequential risks. And you can take a market approach where you're using a lot of market incentives to do that. So I think there are ways to do this, and it's something that we need to work on as a country, but the political will just isn't there, unfortunately.